Hello, this is the third video of the series deploying automation decision service project using CI/CD pipeline. In the first video, we saw how to configure an ADS project in an ADS instance. In the second video, we saw how to create a CI/CD pipeline in an OpenShift cluster and how to configure it. Now in the third video, we are going to see how to trigger the pipeline from the GitHub repository. So for that, we need to have some resources. Firstly, we need to get a webhook. A webhook is a callback which will act as a connector between GitHub repository and our pipeline. Then we need to create some resources in OpenShift cluster like event listener route, event listener service, trigger binding, and trigger template. So an event listener is a resource which will get all the events from the GitHub, and then it also acts as a connector for two other events like that is trigger binding and trigger template. Trigger binding is a resource which will extract the information from the webhook payload, and trigger template is responsible for triggering our pipeline. It contains our pipeline template. So let's get started. So this is the OpenShift cluster, and here we have our ADS pipeline, which contains three tasks: ADS git clone, build, and deploy. So we need to go to the trigger section, and here we need to create the event listener, trigger template, and trigger binding resources. Let's see those three resources first. So event listener is a resource which acts as a connector for other two resources, trigger binding and trigger template here. Now, after creating the event listener, we need to create an event listener route so that our event listener can be exposed as a service. So after creating this event listener route, we will get a route, and that route will actually act as a webhook for us. So let me show you the route itself. Here you can see this is our webhook URL route, which we will use in the further section. So after doing that, we need to create other two resources, which is trigger template and trigger binding. Trigger binding, this actually extracts the information from the webhook payload. So webhook payload actually sends GitHub repository information like repository URL, commit ID, and branch information. So I'm just using the URL here because this is actually what my pipeline actually requires. So I'm just extracting URL from here. Now trigger template is what contains our pipeline template. As you can see here, the template, this is our pipeline. This is the parameter for our pipeline, and this is the workspace for our pipeline. So this URL is what we have extracted from the trigger binding, and here only we are giving here. Now after creating all these events like here, event listener, trigger template, and trigger binding, now we need to set up our webhook. So go to your source repository in GitHub and go to the settings. Here go to the hooks, and here you need to provide your that URL, event listener route. Choose from here application JSON. You can left the secret as blank or add your secret. Then you have to choose, let me select individual events, and from here maybe this pushes is what by default gets checked. You need to uncheck it, and in my case I'm using pull request to trigger the pipeline, so I have checked that, and then you need to update your webhook. After doing that, we just need to create a pull request. So let me use GitHub desktop for it. So after this is my GitHub repository, and I need to create a pull request from here. So I have done just a small change in the README file. Now we need to create a pull request here, and then we should see our pipeline should get started. Let's go back here, go to the pipelines. Okay, it's not started because we haven't created on create pull request. So let's just click on it, and let's see now. As you can see, ADS pipeline has been started. Let's go here, go to our pipeline runs, which is actually running, and you can see the logs, whatever is happening. Now our git clone is done. As you can see, uh, our clone is done. This is our commit ID that we have printed. Now our build has started. You can see Maven build has been started. It will just take 2-3 minutes. So we can just, yeah, so build has done. Now time is to deploy it. So our deployment has also done. We get 200 response. This is our decision ID. This is what our file has been. So let's just see. Now after deploying successfully your decision service, you can check your service from here. So this is decision runtime Swagger API for our ADS instance. You can either use this decision runtime API, execute API for, but here you need three parameters. So the easiest one will be to use the last deployed version execution. Here you need deployment space ID and operation name. Now let's just try it out. It's not this one, this one. So here you need to provide a deployment space ID which is embedded all the cases, and then you need to provide your operation, and then you need to provide decision service ID. Now to get all this information, you need to first of all get your decision ID. So here it requires only deployment space ID. I have given that. When you execute it, you will get all these list of decision IDs that has been deployed in your decision runtime. So we will take the last one, which is the one we have already deployed. Then you need to get the metadata of your decision ID. Now here you can see this contains your decision service ID and operation names also. So our decision service ID is this. Copy this. This is actually the username, project name, and decision service name. Now provide the decision service ID. Now you need to get the operation also. So for operation, you need to use this decision operations. Provide your decision service ID. Click on execute, and you will get your decision operation. Copy this and provide it also as an input. Now you need to provide the request body. This you can get from the open API specification, which is another API here. Retrieve open API specification, you can use that, but for the time being I'm using input from my ADS instance only. And let's provide it here, and let's just execute it. So as you can see, yeah, it is giving me the salutation, the daily advice also based on my name, personal information, and weather information. So this is how our lastly deployed uh, decision service got executed after triggering the pipeline from the GitHub repository. Thanks for watching.